The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Friday from everyone here at TopSolid USA. We're just going to give it just another 30 seconds or so before we get started. Let some other people join in. Today's TopSolid Perspective webinar is going to be all about automatic part positioning. The goal here is to show you how to use some of TopSolid's out-of-the-box automation tools to simplify the loading and positioning of parts into a machining document. In today's webinar, we're going to take a look at two different examples. One will be a chuck and the other one will be a vise. So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started. To begin with, I'm going to kind of paint the picture for you and show you the end of the webinar first. I'm going to show you kind of what's going to happen using these automation tools. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. We have a couple parts to machine here. Okay, so I'm going to take my connector here and I'm going to create a machine part setup document. We're going to go ahead and just quickly define some stock. Don't really care so much about the stock. We'll say there's a little extra over there. Perfect. And now from here, I'm going to provide a function. So a function is just your way of telling TopSolid that you're going to do something in a specific way. So here, for example, I have a function called cylindrical part to machine. I'm going to go ahead and green check that. When I bring that in, it's going to ask me a series of questions. What's the cylindrical face? This is my cylindrical face. What's the orientation relative to Y? Well, let me go turn on my frame here really quick. This is how I'm going to orient the part on the chuck. Okay, so I'm going to come here and say, let's use that axis. My stop face, I'm going to butt that face back there up against the back of the chuck, for example, and then the center line of my part is right there. Perfect. So I've defined my function, or I've applied my function. From here, I'm going to go ahead into my CAM folder and just open up a CAM document. And we're going to come into our accessories and we're going to grab a chuck. And just to kind of show you something here really quick, I'm going to delete the function that I had there, and I'm going to add my function for this as well. So there's two functions that we're going to be creating for the chuck. The first function we create that I just deployed was the cylindrical part to machine. The second one is going to be chuck. So you can see you can drag and drop functions in as well, just like you drag and drop a lot of things. It adds it right to the history. You can double click to edit it. It brings up the question. Or you can go to the tools, provide function command. So chuck frame. Here it's going to ask me for the frame. Perfect. Now it wants the orientation. I'm going to use my frames axis there. My jaw plane is going to be this plane going that way. My stop plane is going to be there. And my center line of chuck is going to be there. So by providing this function now, the software knows that those are the destination mates that I'm going to use. Okay, so we'll save that. And now we're going to show you this all working kind of together. So first rule of thumb, when you're using components that have functions and wizards, and we'll talk about a wizard here in a second, when you're in your machining document, first thing you want to do is make sure you are in the CAD context. Okay, so I'm in my CAD context. I'm going to take this chuck that we just created, or we added the function to. We're going to drag and drop, include it. We don't want it as a machinable part. First thing I'm going to do is just say, hey, let's take this, toss it on there. Perfect. If you notice, if I zoom up here, jaws, of course, move. I skipped over the step that requires you to obviously make the mechanism on your chuck to do this. So again, that's a requirement. We'll go ahead and validate that positioning. It's attached to the main spindle. That's great. From here, I want to take my connector and drag and drop that in. Again, I'm still in the part stage, right? Or the modeling stage. So I'm going to come here. This time I do want an NC part creation, so I'm just going to hit the green check and watch what happens. Notice that that MPS file has automatically shown up aligned with our chuck. The center line is done. the stop is done, everything is done. When I hit my green check here, watch what happens. The jaws automatically close around it. This is awesome. Now, if we wanted to, we can even change these out. So if I go look at this one here, let's go see, does this one have a function on it? It does not. Let's go look really quick. Nope, doesn't have the function. So let's go ahead and apply the function really quick. So this is the chuck function, right? We'll go modify that real fast. Again, we're going to choose our frame, our orientation, our jaw plane. Super important to follow vectors, and I'll talk about this when I show you how to build all this stuff. Your stop plane could be here, could be there, could be wherever you want it to be. Doesn't really matter. Okay, let's put it there. And the center line of the part will be there. Green check, save. Now, when you have functions defined, then you have something called a wizard. A wizard is where you are capturing how you are adding the assembly constraints between functions. Okay, the wizard is automatically detected and applied because it follows the function. So when you assign these functions to your objects, it says, oh, look, I have this function for cylindrical part to machine, and I have this function, chuck, so I must use this wizard. Okay, and that'll make some more sense when we actually build this in a minute. Now, I just defined this other chuck, right? So if I come here, I can come down here and, oops, pardon me, up to here, and go to replace, and I can come into here and just say, you know what, I would like to replace it with that chuck. We'll click OK. Oop, and I made a mistake. Okay, that's okay. So I think I selected the wrong orientation on something, but I'll show you the replacement thing once we're done here when we add this all together on the fly, okay? So we'll come back to this in a moment. The idea there is you can replace anything by anything, but let's just look at this step by step. So since we're focused on chucks, let's start by looking here. First thing that I want to do is I want to build my functions. So I'm going to right click on my folder here, and I'm going to create a new document. In my new document, I'm going to go to my advanced tab here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a part function. There's two types of functions. There's a part function and there's an assembly function. First one we're going to do is a part function. This is going to be used to define the part we're putting in the chuck, right? So I'm going to call this demo part for chuck. Now, when I do this for my demo part for chuck, I want to create a couple of things. When you're creating a function, basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a generic representation of what you want to use to apply assembly constraints to. So in this case, I'm going to create a couple of different things. I'm going to start by creating a couple of axes. I want to create my z-axis. That will be the center line of the part. I'm going to create one along y. That's going to be my orientation. Okay. I'm going to create an offset plane from my XY plane. Maybe we'll offset it just a ½ inch. And then I think that's it. Let me think about this. We have the center line, we have the orientation, and we have the stop plane. That should be that. So now we're going to publish what we want to use. Oh, nope, we need one more thing. We need the cylinder, right? So I'm going to create a little sketch here, create a circle. The diameter doesn't really matter, just make it big enough that you can see it. I'm going to extrude this in both directions, like so. Perfect. So now from here, we are going to go ahead and publish what we want to use. Okay, so there's a bunch of ways to get to publishings. Okay, one way is of course to go to tools here, go to publishings. For example, I could go find publish axis in this list, right? Another way, right click on the object here under others. Perfect. Under the entities manager here, pick the axis you want, publish. Doesn't matter how you get there, just so long as you get there. Now, the name and description here, I usually set them to both, and this will kind of make sense as we progress here, but I'm also very, very careful about how I name things. So for example, I know that this is going to represent the center line of part. And the vector for positioning is going to be relative to my z positive. Okay? Perfect. And you can see that vector right there. When we do our assembly function, we're going to create another axis there, and we're going to make sure the vector is facing the same direction. Okay? So we're going to green check that. Now I'm going to go to here, call this one orientation. This one is in the y positive. Just going to select, copy, paste. Perfect. We'll go ahead and select that. Now I want to publish my plane. I'm going to do it through the right-click method just because it's fun. And we're going to call this stop. Yeah, we'll call it stop plane. Be more specific. Again, orientation is in Z plus. Okay. And then finally, we are going to publish a surface. So in order to publish a surface, again, you got to be more specific about it. I could go to my tools pull down menu here, go to publishings, go find publish surface in there. But because I have my entities tree open, I'm just going to do it right from here. You can go to others, and here's all your publishable objects. And I'm going to come down until I find publish surface. And we're going to call this cylindrical face. Oops. Perfect. And of course, go select the surface with the normal facing out. Now, lastly, I'm going to hide the axes that I created. I'm going to hide the planes that I created. I'm going to hide the shapes that I created. So we're just left with the published objects. And for the part function that we're creating here, we have one more step to take. When you're publishing a surface, you have to modify your representations. So first, I'm going to get rid of the solid that we created here. Okay. And then I'm going to go to my cylindrical face, right click, go to others, add to representations, and have it add to all representations. This way that surface comes along into our wizard in a minute. We can save that and close it. Now let's go create the next function. So here we're going to go to new document, and here we're going to do, instead of a part function, we want an assembly function, and we're going to create basically the same kind of stuff. So I'm going to call this demo chuck. And for those of you wondering why I'm putting a underscore in front of everything, it's just so that it shows up in the list when we go to apply it later at the top automatically. Okay? Because I got lots of functions available in the software. I just want to find them quickly this way. Just a demo trick. Okay, so now we're going to start by maybe offsetting the XY plane. So again, to show you other ways to work, I'm going to go here, go find my XY plane, come to others here, and I can go to offset directly. And in this case, I'm going to offset it back a ½ inch. Okay, really the offset's not truly necessary here, but when I go to create the wizard, it makes it a little easier to see things. Okay, so we have that offset plane. Let's go ahead and make our axes right away. Again, we want one on Z, perfect. We want one on Y, perfect. And I forgot we want one more offset plane. This will be here, going that way, up some distance. Okay, and now from here, let's start publishing things. So let's start with publishing planes, why not? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to publish my plane. So here I want this plane, I want the vector facing this way, right? And this is going to be our stop plane, right? And we're going to call that Z plus. Perfect. This one is going to be our jaw plane. That's in Y plus. Now we're going to publish some axes as well. So let's go ahead and do that. So here, this is going to be center line of part again, Z plus. And then this one is going to be orientation relative to Y plus. Okay. All right, so the next step is we have to create a mechanism. In order for us to capture the fact that the jaw is moving, this plane, we have to make it so it can move. That's why we're in an assembly function. So here I'm going to go to my mechanism stage, or my mechanism tab, pardon me, and then into my mechanism stage. We'll start that. Enter's OK. I'm going to make a quick rigid group. We're going to call this jaw right away with that plane. And then we're going to make a prismatic joint between the jaw and the ground group relative to the jaw's plane. We're not going to put any limits on this. Even though your actual chuck will probably have a limit on it, here we don't want to add a limit because we don't want to run the risk of limiting a chuck accidentally with a different limit. So this is just going to be movable forever. If I go and make a constraint configuration, now you can see that can move. Now, I just caught a potential mistake that I made. Notice we see two planes. And I did this on purpose because I wanted to really point out that you got to pay attention to what you're doing. What I forgot to do was turn off all of my planes and axes so that all I saw was the published objects. So now let's go see if I actually defined the correct object in the jaw. And I didn't. I did not define my published plane. So let's go add that. And now the published plane is what's moving. Perfect. Okay. Last thing that we got to do is publish our absolute frame. So I'm going to come here, publish frame, and I'm going to call this chuck frame. Perfect. So now life is good. We can close all that. We have our two functions. Now, next is the wizard. So let's go ahead and create a wizard. So we're going to come down here to new document. Again, it's an advanced option, wizard. And we're going to call this part on chuck. Perfect. Be specific about what the wizard is doing. And from there, we're going to go ahead and start our wizard. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to define my destination. I tend to always start this way. So my destination is not going to be a part, it's going to be a function, right? And what was the name of my function? It was part for chuck, right? So demo part for chuck is right there. Perfect. Oops, you know what? I'm sorry, my destination is the demo chuck, excuse me. So I just undid that. So demo chuck, there we go. I'm going to edit the positioning of this and do a frame on frame between that published frame and my absolute frame. Okay, so that locks all of that, but I still have my degree of freedom up here. Now I'm going to define the source as a function, and this is going to be the demo part for chuck. Perfect. Notice you see all of the objects here. And now when I edit the positioning, this is just a standard wizard, right? So the wizard is capturing how I want to position my would-be part, right? Again, this is my generic representation of the chuck. This is my generic representation of the part. So I'm going to go here, plane on plane. Notice the vectors. Okay. Next, I'm going to do an axis on axis for the center line to center line. Again, vectors need to face the same way. We don't want to invert things here. Next, I want to do an orientation between, got to hit the right icon. Do an orientation between this and this. That's positioned. Lastly, I validate out of that and I go here to reposition and I can do a plane on surface. Again, vectors are out, okay? And that's the jaw closing. Like that, I have now captured the way that I position parts onto my chuck. That's what the wizard does. Now, let's apply everything. So as you saw earlier, I'm going to do this with my chuck here. So I'll do this with this ROM chuck to start with. Okay. I'm going to use my demo chuck function, right? So there's, again, multiple ways to apply it. I can go to functions here, provide function. I'm going to go find demo chuck, green check. By going through that method, it goes directly into editing this. You could drag and drop this into here. If you use the save searches, you could have searches to your libraries of these functions and drag and drop them directly out of the search found results. Okay, so my chuck frame, let's do this. Here's my chuck frame. My orientation is going to be that. My center line of part is going to be that. My jaw plane, following a y positive, right? And it's not really about y positive, it's just so that you know which way things need to orient, okay? Again, notice I inverted my vector to go up. Super important. Cylindrical face is going to be that. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I named that wrong. Center line apart, orientation. Yeah, I named that wrong. This is supposed to be the stop face. So sorry about that. We can go fix that in a sec. So now we have that. And now we're going to go ahead and create our machine part setup for this. So let's just go ahead and borrow one of these parts here. I'm just going to copy and paste it down into here. And let's go make a machine part setup for this. So we'll go and bang this out really quick. Lovely. Let's go define our function here. And this is going to be our demo part for Chuck. Perfect. All right, cylindrical face is that. Stop plane is that. Orientation, let's go turn my frame on, is that. Center line is that. Perfect. So now, if I did this right, we should be able to go create a new cam file and test it out. So let's go here. Let's make sure, again, you're in CAD mode. Super important. If you're not in CAD mode, the wizard won't launch. Let's go take our chuck, drag and drop it in. It's an inclusion. Perfect. We could go here. To here is fine. Again, if you look, jaws are working. That's fabulous. I should point out also, I don't have the include and last positioning active. Okay. And now let's go try taking our hourglass, popping it in there. Check it out. Part is positioned. So now that the functions are created, you can apply these functions to every MPS file or every chuck that you define. And then when you go to position them into your CAM file, positioning can be done automatically. Cool. All right, so let's take a look at another sample. Let's look at how a vise might work. Okay, so I'm going to minimize my chuck sample here. And we're going to go into vices next. Our webinar is probably going to go a little over 30 minutes today just because I want to show both of these aspects to you guys. So bear with me here. Again, if we go ahead and we look at some of these, well, I think you get the idea. Why don't we just, to save time in the webinar, I'm just going to go ahead into the live demonstration portion and we'll define everything. And you'll see the vice there at the end. Okay, so for this, we're going to create, again, two functions, right? So the first function we're going to create is going to be under advanced here. It's going to be a part function. Okay. I'm going to put this as demo part for vice. Here we want to create a series of planes and then a frame. Okay. So I'm just going to go straight to my construction tab here. I'm going to kind of rotate my view a little bit so it's oriented how I want it. I'm going to go straight to offset. I'm going to start by offsetting my YZ plane forward some distance. Okay, and again, the distance isn't so important. It's just so that it's out there. And then I'm going to do it again, but this time in the other direction. And then I'm going to take my XZ plane out that way. And then just because I'm here, I'm going to create an XY plane just with a 0 offset. Okay, so I have these 3 planes, and these 3 planes are going to represent the fixed side of my jaw, the movable jaw, the top of the riser or parallel that you're going to put it on in the jaw, and your stop. So let's go ahead and publish all this. So I'm going to go here and go to publish plane. Again, paying attention to vectors, right? So I'm going to call this fixed jaw plane, and this is going to be in the X minus orientation. And again, just to illustrate this, I'm just putting these X pluses or minuses in to help me remember down the road what the vector orientation is that I'm trying to maintain when I run the wizard. Okay, so this is going to be movable jaw, helps to spell well. This is going to be in the X plus orientation. This is going to be stop plane, Y minus. And this is going to be top of riser, Z plus. Perfect. Okay, so before I finish, I'm going to turn off the originals, or the originals, so we just see our publishings. I'm going to save this and close it. Now, let's go ahead and create the assembly function that we need. So again, new document. Here it's going to be an assembly function. And for my assembly function, again, it's going to be similar, right? So I'm going to call this demo vice. Let's go ahead and make what we need to make. So I'm going to go to my construction tab here, kind of rotate my screen so we see things a little better. And again, I'm going to create very similar things, right? So I'm going to take my YZ plane. I'm going to come forward some distance. Take my YZ plane again. Go back. Take my XZ plane. We'll take my XY plane. Maybe we'll offset that up just a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to publish these things. And again, we're following the same rules here. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to publish plane. This is going to be fixed jaw plane, X minus. Movable jaw plane, X plus. This will be stop plane, Y minus. Top of riser, Z plus. Perfect. We're also going to go ahead and publish our absolute frame as vice frame. Awesome. So now we got to define a mechanism. Again, before we do that, I'm going to turn off the planes that I've created. And then I'm going to go to mechanism. We'll start that up. We're going to make one here called jaw. Again, oops, do I not have? Yeah, movable plane jaw. That's right. That's the published one. Let's make the joint. So this will be between the jaw and the ground group. And we'll say it's relative to that. Perfect. Life is good. And then we make our configuration, we test, and all is working as it should. So lastly, we want to make our wizard, right? So let's go define our new document here. We're going to define our wizard. Again, the wizard is where you're capturing how these constraints are being applied. And this is going to be part on vice. All right. So I'm going to start by including my destination. Again, it's going to be a function, and this is going to be the demo vice. Perfect. Again, I'm just going to do a quick little editing of positioning here. We'll do a frame on frame, just because I like to have those locked in. Okay. And now let's go ahead and add our source. The source is going to be the demo part for vise. You can see that's been brought in. If I edit the positioning on that, I can just go ahead and start applying my constraints. So here, I want a plane on plane between there and there. Again, paying attention to your vectors. This one to here. By being careful about how I applied everything when I published my frames, all of my vectors are automatically lining up. Okay. Last step is, of course, the reposition. I want to put this on this, and we're done. We've captured how we want to apply or use those functions with this positioning wizard. Okay, so now it's to apply this to an accessory. So let's go ahead to our vise here. Here's the little Kurt vise. Again, you can see it moves, right? So you have to make sure you add that mechanism to your vise assembly. I'm going to take my vise function and apply it. And then we'll go back to my operations here and modify it. So my vise frame is going to be here. My top of riser is that. Again, make sure the arrow points up, right? My stop plane is this. Again, making sure my arrow faces out. My movable jaw is this, but pay attention, that's going the wrong way. I need it to be that way, according to how I defined my functions, right? And my wizard. And then my fixed jaw is that, again, needs to face out. Okay, so that's done. Let's go ahead and do a machine part setup really quick. We'll take this one and just do a machine part setup on it really quick here. Just gonna accept the defaults for it. And I'm gonna move this down into our demo folder just so we can stay focused. All right, so here's my silly little part. And now what I'm gonna do with this part is apply my function. So let's go here to functions, provide function. And this function needs to be demo part for vise. So let's go find demo part for vise. And how you apply this now is up to you. And here's what I mean. We can apply this so that the part is turned. Like for example, I do want it going into the vise like this so that the length is along the jaws. So my top of riser plane is going to be this bottom face, arrow facing up. My stop plane is going to be this face, which means my movable jaw is going to be this face, and my fixed jaw is going to be that face. And again, all my vectors are facing out except for my riser that faces up. Perfect. And now let's go ahead and make a machining. So we'll go here. This time I'll throw it onto Makino. All right, again, make sure you're in CAD mode. Let's start by adding our vise. This is an inclusion. And here I want to go to there. That's perfect. That's part of the table. Again, we notice this works. And now, again, we don't want to be including last position. We want that off. We want to be in CAD context. Now, if I take my machine part setup file that we made and applied our function to, we hit OK. Notice that it's already positioned on the fixed side. And then when we click OK, that jaw closes. How's that for a speedy way of positioning parts? Now, again, where this will really come in handy is you create a library of these functions and of wizards using these functions, okay? The wizard never has to be applied. The wizard is auto-detected based on the functions you apply. So then you can create the functions as needed, okay? Or pardon me, not create, you can apply the functions as needed. Once you have all the functions applied to your standard fixturing, that's easy. Then it's just applying the function to your machine part setup file. Now, fun things that happen with this. For example, if I go here, notice I can pull back and it just snaps back. The function or the wizard is always looking to make sure the function is applied. Okay. Now you can mix and match things. What do I mean? Let's go grab another part really quick and let's go to here And let's do a machine part setup for this one. And now we're going to just say, okay, accept those defaults. Yes, my parts are silly. I agree. I'm going to bring that down to there just again so we can stay focused. And here I want to apply my function. So I'm going to go to functions and I'm going to go ahead and provide function. And again, this is my demo part for Vice. So let's go to demo part for Vice. And let's apply this. Now, in this case, I want to put this in the long way, we'll say, just for fun. So I'm going to say the top of riser is still this bottom face going up. My stop plane is going to be that face. My movable jaw is that. My fixed jaw is that. Perfect. Now, let's go back to machining. Let's say that we didn't want this part in here. I can come in here, come to others. We should be, always go to the wrong others. Go to replace. And I can go to here. And notice it's updated with the correct new part, and all of our positions are updated. And the reason why that updated is because all the positionings are being done based on the functions, right? So when we publish those planes in each of the functions, that's what this wizard is using. It could care less about the part. It's positioning based on the functions. This way, your positions always, always, always update and the part is irrelevant. Well, this about does it. Actually, I'm pretty impressed. I only ran 5 minutes long. Right now, why don't we open this up to some questions? So let's see, we have some questions here. Thinking about how I could use the function in a family so I don't have to reapply for a family of parts. I don't think you can do a family of an MPS document. So you can't do a family of an MPS document, I don't believe. Here, I guess this would answer that question. Yeah, family's not listed there. But what you could still do is you could apply the function in that singular MPS file and then just change which family member is being referenced in the MPS file. So the function is always up to date. That should work. Does anyone else have any questions for me? One of the things I'll say, thanks guys. One of the things I will say is when you try this, as I know you all will, take your time, follow the steps, follow the video. It's a little bit confusing at first because you have to think in an abstract way to begin with. So when you're building your functions, think about what it is you're trying to achieve, test it out, run it. Okay? I say good luck and check it back next week for next week's webinar. Have a great weekend, everybody.